Welcome to the Rotowire DFS podcast brought to you by FanDuel.com. I'm your host, Josh Hayes, joined as always by Benny Ricciardi as we break down the Saturday NBA DFS slate. You can find Benny on Twitter at BennyR11 and over at RotoCurve, Rotowire, and as a featured writer in the DraftKings playbook. And you can also follow me on Twitter at JoshHayesFS. The Rotowire DFS podcast is now live streaming on Google Hangouts, available on the official YouTube channel. And you can check us out on iTunes and Stitcher as well. Benicio, welcome to another fine slate for Saturday in the NBA.
Yeah, pretty good size one with 8 games. There are a lot of the teams that are, defensive stalwarts going up on this slate today, though. Like the other night, we had a 4-game slate where it was all teams that score in the 110 to 115 range on a daily basis, and this is a slate that I think there's going to be a lot of spreads here in like the low 200s and the 190s. With one or two exceptions like the Houston-Chicago game and probably the Atlanta Clippers game. I think those are going to be two of the higher scoring ones on the day that, are probably some of the better ones to target here.
Yep, I totally agree with you there as well. So what we're going to have to do is just sort of pick a couple of the options that you can sort of take advantage of going forward. In the plus matchups, and there are a few plus matchups. We do have Sacramento on the slate. We have Houston there as well. So there's a couple different, options that we can work with, and there are some of my favorite value plays at the point guard position as well. But I'll save those for my turn, and I'll let you go first with what you got at the point today.
Yeah, I think that you actually hit on something that I've been looking at with the slate with value plays at the point guard position. Mostly because I don't really want to spend up for a lot of these guys towards the top. John Wall and Chris Paul are both pretty expensive. Neither one of them is really in a great matchup. Wall's going up against Indiana. Chris Paul's going up against Atlanta. Neither one of those matchups really screams like huge upside matchup for either one of those guys. So I don't think I'm going to be paying up for any of them. And then even like Rondo against San Antonio is not something I'm going to mess with. Kyrie against Boston, who's got, one of the better point guard defenses in the entire league. Drew Holiday against Utah, who's just such a slow-paced team and good defensively. So a lot of the guys up top just really don't make a lot of sense to use here. I do like Ricky Rubio a little bit, who I know you hate, but his price is down to almost, what did they drop his price down to? It's down below 7K. He's down to like 6,700. And in 5 of his last 8 games, he's gone for 35 or more fantasy points, which has been, at least a 5x return. So I think he's a solid option if you want to spend up a little bit at the point guard spot. But yeah, I'm going down to guys like, Shelvin Mack, who's been around min price, guys like Donald Sloan, who's pretty cheap and has been putting up decent numbers. Darren Collison, Norris Cole. Like I'm looking in that range here today. I'm thinking that at least one, if not two, of those guys are going to wind up on my roster.
Yeah, I agree with you there as well. You can definitely make some hay with some of the value options at this point, and I feel like it's going to be tough for you to take advantage of some of the top guys because of the potential matchups there. But you know what? I still feel like Chris Paul is going to be about as trustworthy as he gets as I bend over and plug in my Ethernet cord. For those of you wondering, what am I doing on video? Yeah, I just realized I was working on Wi-Fi, and now the internet will be a lot faster this way. So for me, you know what? I don't mind particularly taking a look at Isaiah Thomas against Cleveland as well. That's that Boston has been a top 3 seed all season long, and that's Kyrie Irving defense. So Isaiah Thomas actually was a player who I believe made my lineup for Friday's action, and I'm definitely okay running it back on Saturday as well. I don't really want to mess too much with the front line, but Isaiah Thomas can do almost all of his damage from the outside as well. So there's a potential opportunity there as well. Want to get your take on Patrick Beverley against Chicago, which is a favorite play of mine, and Shelvin Mack against the New Orleans Pelicans. How do you feel about those two value plays, and how do you rank them?
Well, Shelvin Mack has been staying at the floor at like $3,500. So if he's still the floor, I think he's definitely a viable guy if you're looking to save salary. How cheap is Beverly now? Is he in the 4s, or what has he been over the last couple games on FanDuel?
If I had my Internet.
As I said, I haven't played him on FanDuel much recently, so I don't know where his prices come up to. Let me take a look here real quick. I got it. Yeah, 4,800. At 4,800, I think he's an okay value play. I probably like him a little more than Mac, only because I think he has a little more upside, especially now that they got rid of Ty Lawson. He's basically the only point guard they have. He's been playing 30, the games where he sees over 30 minutes, he tends to go 5 or 6x value. The games where he's missed playing 30 minutes, where he's only gotten like 24 or 27, those are the games that we usually see him, kind of underperform. So I think I'm a little more comfortable with Beverly than I am with Shelvin Mack for upside. Mac, though, it's been min price. So if he stays at 3,500, I mean, that's just really, really too cheap.
Yeah, I agree with you there as well. The situation that I have here is, do you trust Donald Sloan? At 4,800, who's been pretty consistent in terms of hitting the 20 fantasy points. He's just not like a 37, 38, 40 plus guy, and you would have thought that he would have sort of gotten more shots, but he really just is like, cracking double digits assists, getting you double digit points, getting you, 5, 6 assists. But really, Donald Sloan to me is only somebody you can use for cash games. Beverly to me, in this price range has, flipped around between the 25 to 30 point range. And, if he's going to be sitting around in the 48 to 4,500 range, you can pull 6x out of him. And so, if you want to roll him in cash and GPPs, I think that makes, some definite sense as well. Shelvin Mack has just been frustrating for whatever reason. Sometimes they pull him in fourth quarters, or he'll, get off to a slow start and then end up, returning close to the price tag, which shouldn't be that as difficult as it is, because it's near min price. But it's very hard to pry yourself off if you're like, well, starter, potentially 30 minutes at the bottom of the barrel, price wise. So I don't want to get myself stuck in too much in value town. And I also don't mind Darren Collison. Again, I know that we say we never play people against the San Antonio Spurs, but he's been pretty effective, and he's going to get some second team defense versus the San Antonio Spurs, which is like Patty Mills, who's never been a defensive stalwart. The other thing I will say too is, if you really feel like gambling, and I think this is more of a shooting guard or small forward play, I would have to check on where we have him listed on FanDuel. But Marco Bellinelli has been actually a little bit of a rainmaker as of late. He's one of the primary reasons that the Kings got out to a lead and held the lead in that game against Dallas on Thursday. And that's his former team against the San Antonio Spurs, who opted to not to re-sign him. So it's got to be a little bit of hurt feelings in my mind, and a little revenge factor, I think, boiling in this spot, particularly because he didn't play well when San Antonio traveled to Sacramento back at home. So back in where he used to play, won the 3-point contest as a San Antonio Spur. I don't mind him for a nice little cheap flyer in a GPP. All right, let's go ahead and move forward to the shooting guard position here, Benny, for the Saturday slate, and talk about what you want to do at the 2.
Yeah, I think before we even get into this conversation, the biggest question that everybody's going to have, and the thing we should probably start discussing, is Jimmy Butler's coming back on Saturday. So they're matched up against Houston. So the two guys who are the top 2 guys price-wise, and likely the top 2 scorers at the shooting guard position, if all things are equal, would be James Harden and Jimmy Butler. Now, a healthy Jimmy Butler is something that I would have pause using or paying up for James Harden against. And also Jimmy Butler going against Houston would be a guy that I want. But how do you think it's going to be in his game back? Like, do you think he's going to get thrown in there and play, are we going to get 35 minutes out of Jimmy Butler in this game? And if so, how do you think that affects Harden, and what do you think it means for his value? And also, you got to think it's going to hurt the value of the other guys on the team, like Derrick Rose and Pau Gasol, who have been picking up the slack with him out. So how do you view the Jimmy Butler coming back thing before we get in there? Because I think that's going to be a big question that people have to ask, is how they want to handle that in order for them to really know what they want to do at the shooting guard spot.
For me, I think we've talked about this a number of times, and I'm going to stick to this. It's just that everybody, regardless of who they are, first game back, you said you ride the pine. in my DFS lineups. All right, because I don't know if they're going to play 22 minutes or 42 minutes, and they really shouldn't. Honestly speaking, with the injury that he had, he should not be coming back and playing, 35 plus minutes. Let's be honest here. And if they do it, and if they do it the way we think that they would, which makes the most sense, which is sort of split the minutes between him and Eton Warrant, get them 20 something each, don't overwork Jimmy Butler, and have him, re-injure the thing just after he came right back. You don't want to play any of those guys because it's an ugly timeshare. So I'm going all the way up to James Harden for sure on the Saturday slate. And I don't mind Zach LaVine against Brooklyn. There's a couple other different directions we can go in this spot too. We remember we played Danny Green against Sacramento last time, and because we knew they couldn't defend the 3-point line, they did not defend the 3-point line against Chandler Parsons again on Dallas on Thursday. So that's just a situation that you can still definitely take advantage of, and I'm fine with Danny Green once again in GPPs. How do you have the shaking out for the rest of the players at the 2?
Yeah, I mean, right now the 3 guys I have on my list are James Harden for me paying up, Zach LaVine, who again is right around that 5-6K range, has been putting up 30 plus fantasy points. They just got rid of Kevin Martin, so he's going to have safer minutes there. The matchup is pretty good against Brooklyn. Brooklyn's guards, basically don't guard anybody. So I like LaVine a lot. And then from there, I go down to Eric Gordon, who's still pretty cheap as well. It's a tough matchup against Utah overall, but he had a tough matchup against San Antonio the other day and still put up a pretty decent game. And the thing is, you want to kind of attack Utah at the guard spot because you don't want to mess around with, going up with the big guys against the Twin Towers down there. So I'm still okay using Eric Gordon, who I think is pretty cheap too. But I really like Zach LaVine, and I think I'm going to have a lot of shares of, James Harden because he's just such the likely high scorer at a very weak position that he kind of stands out to me as, one of the guys that you have to have far and away over the other options that you can have as far as, position scarcity goes.
I definitely agree with you there as well. It's just when we talked about how we don't really love the top options. I mean, I'm still okay with Chris Paul against Atlanta at the point position, but aside from that, we're missing some serious studs. The next big stud I would see probably been at the time. So we're not spending a ton necessarily unless you want to lock in CP3, and we don't have to because we talked about how we love people in the lower to mid tier. So I'm definitely fine with anchoring with James Harden at the 2, and then moving on from there. There's a couple different directions we can go. For value at the shooting guard position as well. Zach LaVine is I've been in his camp all season long, and we, like I said, talked about Danny Green. I don't necessarily mind Jamal Crawford, but probably not the best spot to play him against a solid Atlanta defense overall. So, and I do like your call of Eric Gordon. I do the pace does concern me a little bit for Utah because they play slow it down. But Eric Gordon is if he's smart, isn't trying to get anything at the rim against the Utah Jazz. He should just stay out there on the wing and bomb away like he normally does. Last guy I want to quickly ask you about here. In or not in on Drew Holiday for Saturday?
Not in on Drew Holiday for Saturday. I don't really like. I gotta go back and check because I'm looking at shooting guards right now. Who do they play? I think it was something about the matchup that had me off of Holiday.
It's Utah.
Yeah, Utah. I'm actually off of him because he is a guy that gets a lot more of his buckets going to the hole. So going to the hole against Gobert and Favors, I don't think is going to be a great situation for him. So, like I said, at the point guard spot, I'm looking to kind of save money, so I can spend up and go get like a James Harden and some of the small forwards who I think are worth paying up for.
All right, makes some sense to me. All right, we're going to move on to the small forward position, but before we move on to small forward position, to let all the podcast listeners know, all the YouTube watchers know as well, that if you haven't joined up on Rotowire.com yet, what are you waiting for? We got a 10-day free trial available to you. Rotowire.com/pod. Features include lineup optimizers for MLB, NBA, NFL, NHL, college, basketball, soccer. We have golf. And the optimizers there as well. You can get up to the minute depth charts, customizable league projections, complete draft kits for the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, and NHL. Get your season-long fantasy baseball league coming up with some custom scoring. You can load those scoring options in there, and we'll let you know by position ranking all the top players whether it be for draft position or auction salary. So a lot of great features coming that are available, and you can take advantage of that in a 10-day free trial. Rotowire.com/pod is how you do that. Let them know that Josh and Benny sent you. All right, small forward let's go ahead and talk about who you're putting down at the 3 today.
Yeah, my favorite play by far is Kawhi Leonard. Going up against Sacramento, a team that he just had a big game against. Was that last night? No, a couple days ago, or last week or so. Leonard's been playing very well. The last 5 or 6 games, he's over 5 or 6x in each one of them. Last night, he had a huge game. I forget who they played last night, but he had a huge game last night. Put up like 56 fantasy points or something like that. So he's easily the number 1 option in the matchup against Sacramento. Again, high-paced team, gives up a lot of points. Someone we've targeted all season long, yada, yada, yada. After that, though, I'm probably going to be looking to spend up for a second guy at the small forward position. I like LeBron a little bit in that game against Boston. Boston plays at a higher pace. They, that game should stay close, so he should be able to get full minutes. I think is it at Boston? Yeah, it's at Boston, or is it at Cleveland? I got to double check on that. Oh, it is at Cleveland. They are at home. Yeah, they are at home. But still, I think that game stays close. So I think we see, full run from LeBron James. So I think he could be somebody that puts up a good game. Paul George hasn't been playing great lately, but he did have 55 points earlier in the season against, the same Washington team. We know Washington at the small forward spot with Otto Porter is not very good. So that's another situation there that I think I could like him. And then if I'm not using one of those guys, I'm probably coming down to a cheapie like, you got Bojan Bogdanovic. Again, I don't really love him, but he's cheap. He's playing 30 minutes a game for the Nets. He's doing some scoring. He's, grabbing a couple of the other stats for you. And then even a guy like Tobias Harris, I think, is a little bit interesting. Going up against the Knicks, I think there's going to be a lot of points in that game. Harris is a decent cash game play. He's been getting you like 4.5 to 5.5x value, but not really much upside. So for upside, I'd be looking to spend up on, Kawhi definitely, and then probably either LeBron or Paul George will be the second guy I roll. And that's another reason why I'm trying to save at the point guard spot, because I'd rather spend up for some of these guys at the small forward position today.
All right. I'm good with most of those guys. I love Kawhi Leonard. I guess that's probably the pick for me at that spot. We know Rudy Gay has a tendency to get lost on defense, and Kawhi Leonard can drain it from outside. So I think he's a very smart and a solid player. I'm good with Bojan or Bogo, or what do we call him? Boogie down. I don't know. He's not Boogie because Boogie is DeMarcus Cousins, which isn't a good conundrum today because San Antonio on the road, like DeMarcus Cousins has been a cash game lock. So I'll be interested to see how you end up breaking that down when we get to the center position. But we'll put that on pause for now. Tobias Harris, I don't know if you mentioned him in your analysis. But so I believe that this is going to be one of the better spots that we can take advantage of for this slate. Do you consider him in the Detroit role as a power forward, even though he is small forward eligible? That's something I always like to take note of in my articles. I think that is also the case with him playing alongside Marcus Morris, who's definitely smaller than Tobias Harris. Are we in agreement that he's a stretch for your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about him is that, those two guys are kind of interchangeable, which I think is something that people get a little caught up on sometimes. Like we look at these DVP numbers and things like that, but, one of the reasons why I think the Warriors are so good is because with the guys that they have on the outside, they can seamlessly switch off and guys can still guard other people. And I think that's kind of along the lines of what Detroit's trying to do now. So whether it's Morris or Harris playing the 4, it doesn't really matter to me. Both of those guys do help out rebounding, which for fantasy is the thing that I really care about, is that, they're going to get me some rebounds, whether they're playing the 3 or the 4. So, right now I don't mind, having either one of those guys near my roster. But Harris is usually the one who matches up on, opposing teams' power forwards a lot of the time, at least recently since the trade. So, he's the guy that kind of gets the rebounding boost a little bit for me. So that's the way I look at it.
All right. And the last sort of either or that I want you to help me make a decision on here. Do you go with Bojan Bogdanovic with starters minutes and maybe a bigger potential ceiling, or for value and the price tag return, do you go Dougie McBuckets in this matchup here for Saturday?
Yeah, I go Bogdanovich every time there because his minutes are safer. McBuckets has been playing minutes, but he's also splitting minutes with Dunleavy there. And now you got Jimmy Butler coming back, which is just going to be another guy thrown in the mix. So I'm less certain that he's going to play enough minutes to give me a solid floor than I am with Bogdanovich, who I'm positive is going to see those minutes because the Nets just really don't have anybody else to put in there at that position. So that's how I look at those two.
All right, I think I'm with you with Bogdanovich, especially now that he's sort of leveled up here in the past couple games with a 7 and 9x. So he's been scoring and rebounding at a pretty good clip, and we're talking about min salary. This is what we hope and pray for min salary. So very nicely done. And for whatever reason with Mick Buckets, the production has been pretty decent there, but he's $500-$600 more expensive. So similar point totals, except for the last 2 games where for whatever reason his shots weren't falling and he wasn't rebounding as much on the road against Miami or Orlando. And the other thing that we have to factor into is Jimmy Butler comes in, minutes have to go out somewhere. We think it's going to be Etuan Moore, but it could be at a little bit at the expense of Dougie McBuckets as well. So I think he's definitely less attractive as a value option, and it's why we got to go with your boy Boyan. All right, that's going to wrap it up for the small forward position. Power forward up next. Let's go ahead and talk about what's going on in the paint for you on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. Right now, I don't have this is definitely the guy I'm going to play. But there are 4 guys who I'm looking at the power forward spot, and none of them really have huge upside for me. But these are the 4 guys who I think are kind of in the best spots. You have Kevin Love going up against the Boston Celtics. We know that the Celtics struggle with frontline players, so I think it's a pretty good spot here for Love. He hasn't been giving you huge returns lately. He's about 7K. He's given you 40 in 2 of his last 6 games, 33 and 35 in 2 others. And then he had 2 bad games, where he only scored 17 and 16 fantasy points. So it's tough for me to recommend him, even though I do think it's going to be a game where he plays more minutes than he normally does. And, the game stays kind of close. I also like Thad Young going up against Minnesota. Thad's been a guy who's been pretty solid lately. His floor has been a minimum of 4x that he's given you, which has been right around 30 fantasy points. And he's given you 40 and 50 point upside in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 of his last 10 or 11 games. So again, he's like right on the cusp there of a guy that I'd be looking at. The other 2 guys that I might pay up for would be LaMarcus Aldridge going up against Sacramento. Again, his numbers have been a little bit better the last couple games, right around like that 5x range, but he's not somebody that I think has huge upside for a tournament. I like him a little more for cash. I think he's a little safer there. And then one of the safest cash game plays over the last couple games has been Jared Sellinger, who's going up against Cleveland in this one. I think he's still in a pretty good matchup. As long as Kelly Olynyk is out, he's just seeing enough minutes and getting enough of the offensive load that, he's somebody you have to look at right around that 6K range. He's giving you some 30 and 40 point upside kind of games. So I like Sellinger as well. So those are the 4 guys that I'm looking to pay up for. Then one thing that I really want to do is if Taj Gibson is out again, I'm probably going to plug in Bobby Portis for cheap. Then, try to save some money to spend up at center and small forward where I want to get some of those studs over there. So I think Portis will be a pretty popular option, and I think he deserves to be. I think he's in a pretty good spot there.
All right, so for me, the way I'm looking at this here is a couple different things that I have going on. I love the call with LaMarcus Aldridge. I'm totally fine with your ex-boyfriend Paul Millsap once again against the LA Clippers. LA Clippers still haven't fixed their power forward position, and if they're gonna roll Paul Pierce and Ba Mute or whatever combination that they even Jeff Green playing there as a 3 or stretch 4, and that's all good for Paul Millsap inside and out. That should be a matchup he should expect to dominate. And you can't really help out too much against Al Horford from DeAndre Jordan's perspective. So I think that he's going to be a good play. And then your boy, I can't believe you didn't mention Thad Young. Thad Young once again, and I think is in a
I
really
said
good spot
that.
here. Did
I
you?
mentioned
Okay.
that. Yeah.
All right. I was like, he's gonna wait for Thad, wait for Thad, wait for Thad. Oh, and then maybe I was waiting for my Thad page to load while you were actually mentioned that, and I missed it. But yes, I love his upside there as well. I think he's been we had questions about whether it was going to be more Brook Lopez, more Donald Sloan, Bogdanovich, or Thad Young, and I think it's the answer to who gets the extra shots in production now that Joe Johnson's off the roster is Boyan and Thad Young, and we've seen some pretty solid production overall. I'm going to throw out the LA Clippers game in this matchup and focus on the fact that he scored 21 against Utah, produced 7.6x against Phoenix, and then comes back against the LA Lakers for 41 fantasy points and almost 6x with 19 and 15 against the LA Lakers in back-to-back games. So pretty strong performances overall from Thad. Cash safe with a little bit of GPP upside. All right, before we move on to the center position today, Benny, we have to talk to all the business owners out there. If you have a business, you might need a website. Why not do it yourself here with Wix.com? So no matter what business you're in, Wix.com is something for you. Used by more than 75 million people worldwide, Wix makes it easy to get your website live today. You need to get the word out about your business. It all starts with a stunning website. So with hundreds of designer-made, customizable templates to choose from, the drag and drop editor, there's no coding needed. You don't need to be a programmer or designer to create something beautiful. You can do it yourself with Wix.com. Wix.com empowers business owners to create their own professional websites each and every day. So when you're running your own business, you're bound to be busy. Too busy to worry about the budgets, the scheduling appointments, or too busy to build a website for your business. And because you're too busy, it has to be easy. And that's where Wix.com comes in. With Wix.com, it's easy and free. Go to Wix.com to create your own website today. The results will be stunning. All right, let's go ahead and talk about these stunners here at the center position for Saturday and talk about who's going to be in the pivot for you in your lineups.
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say is DeMarcus Cousins is a horrendous play against the San Antonio Spurs. He has 2 games this year against them where he went 41 in the first game, and then I think he had like 34 or 35 fantasy points in the second game. So he does not produce against the Spurs. They make it a point to try to shut him down and run double teams at him and stuff like that, which is smart and what more teams should do. So I'm definitely not paying up for Cousins here. On the flip side, though, I do like Karl-Anthony Towns going up against Brooklyn, who's the other, highest priced option. Towns had put up some big numbers. He cooled off a little bit in the last couple games, but Brooklyn's a team that we know doesn't defend big guys very well. So I think Towns is in a good spot. I also want to have some shares of Dwight Howard here going up against Chicago. Chicago's been really bad, bottom 5 in the league for, fantasy points allowed to to opposing centers. So I think Dwight Howard's in a really good spot here where he could have a big upside game. Those are the 2 guys who I'm really looking at up towards the top. Down towards the bottom, I've been rolling Jan Mahimi a little bit, and he's still pretty cheap. So if his price stays down when his paced up game against Washington, I think he can give us a good game down there at the bottom if I'm looking to save some money. And Robin Lopez also is a guy who's been getting a lot of extra minutes and is pretty cheap down there. So if I'm looking to save, I'm going with those 2. But I think this is a position I want to pay up for on the day. And the 2 guys who I think I'm going to wind up doing it for are Karl-Anthony Towns and Dwight Howard. Yeah,
Karl-Anthony Towns, the big cat, has been super consistent. The only concern I ever have about Karl-Anthony Towns now is meeting the high price tag, because it is high, but you're going to love the matchup against Brolo for sure. So I love that call. Same situation with Dwight Howard. No one's ever afraid of Pau Gasol defense. So I think you're going to be in a good spot there. And for a little bit more value too, I'm actually looking at Rudy Gobert in this spot. Is a little bit off the radar in terms of a play because he's been a little bit consistent. He's scored in 25 plus in the past 2 games. That's really only good for 4x. It's $6,800 price tag. The price has actually been sliding downward though. He was at a peak of about 7,500 as late as just a little under a month ago, and now he's down into the 6,800 range. Matchup is as good as can be for the Utah Jazz and New Orleans Pelicans, who are going to draw the center position and now are without Omer Sheik, who was already one of the worst defensive centers in the NBA. Now you're going to take him out of the lineup and you're going to put a Jinka in there or even worse, Kendrick Perkins. This should be a great opportunity for him to make some hay on both sides of the ball, offensive and defensive rebounds. And I think this is a great bounce back game for him to come on the road that not everybody will be paying attention to. So I'll be going big with the Gab Stopper, Rudy Gobert, Stifle Tower. It's going to be in my lineup here on Saturday. All right, and that's going to wrap it up for today's show. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Don't forget you can subscribe to the iTunes and Stitcher feeds for this very podcast, the Rotowire DFS podcast, on your smartphone. Don't forget to press that red subscribe button on YouTube for the official Rotowire YouTube channel. We've been adding subscribers every day. We appreciate you joining the team and jumping in there as well. And we'll be back here on Monday for another week of fantasy DFS analysis and information. Don't forget to check out Benny on Twitter at BennyR11. Check me out on Twitter at JoshHatesFS. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.